World War I, also known as the Great War, was unlike any conflict the world had ever seen. Spanning from 1914 to 1918, it combined industrial-scale technology with massed human armies, creating unprecedented devastation. Soldiers faced machine guns, artillery barrages, poisonous gas, and the perils of new aerial warfare. Civilians experienced propaganda campaigns and the constant fear of total war. The innovations and brutality of World War I reshaped how wars were fought, and forever altered the lives of those who endured it. This article explores the deadly technologies, tactics, and human stories that defined the conflict, revealing a war waged not only with guns and gas, but with ingenuity, grit, and sheer survival. Before World War I, battles were fought with muskets, rifles, and cavalry charges. Soldiers expected to face the enemy in lines or formations, relying on courage and strategy more than sheer firepower. That all changed with the machine gun. The Maxim gun, introduced in the late 19th century, and its successors, like the Vickers and Browning models, could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, mowing down waves of soldiers with terrifying efficiency. On the battlefields of the Somme and Verdun, advancing infantry met a wall of lead and steel. Entire platoons were decimated before reaching enemy lines. Trenches, once defensive strongholds, became killing zones, with machine guns dominating no man's land. Commanders were forced to rethink tactics as traditional frontal assaults turned into suicidal missions. For soldiers on both sides, the machine gun was more than a weapon, it was a psychological nightmare. Accounts from the front tell of men frozen in mud, pinned down by continuous fire, their hearts pounding as the deafening rattle of bullets filled the air. The relentless mechanical roar created a new form of terror, the certainty of death from something unstoppable and impersonal. The introduction of the machine gun demonstrated how technology could outmatch human courage. It reshaped battle strategies, caused unprecedented casualties, and marked the beginning of a new era of warfare, one in which ingenuity and industrial might determined survival more than bravery alone. If machine guns were the scream of the battlefield, artillery was its unrelenting thunder. By the time World War I erupted, artillery had evolved into a deadly force capable of raining destruction across miles of enemy territory. Heavy cannons, howitzers, and mortars pounded trenches day and night, often with no warning. The ground shook, buildings crumbled, and soldiers learned quickly that survival meant hiding wherever possible. Artillery was responsible for more deaths than any other weapon in the war. Long-range shells could obliterate entire units before they even reached the front lines, while shrapnel tore through flesh and bone, leaving lasting scars on the battlefield and on those who survived. Barrages became a standard tactic. Enemy positions were softened, communication lines severed, and morale crushed. Soldiers often spent hours or even days crouched in shell craters, praying the next salvo would pass them by. The psychological impact of artillery was just as devastating as its physical effects. Continuous bombardment caused shell shock, a new form of trauma that left countless soldiers trembling, disoriented, or paralyzed with fear. Letters home were filled with descriptions of endless noise, destruction, and the feeling that death could strike from anywhere at any time. Artillery transformed World War I into a war of attrition, where victory was measured not only by territory gained but by how much the enemy could endure. It forced armies to rethink defensive strategies and left a permanent mark on the landscape. Craters, shattered trees, and ruined villages standing as grim reminders of the war's industrialized brutality. World War I brought a new, terrifying weapon that could not be seen, heard, or easily fought against: poison gas. Introduced by the Germans at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, chlorine gas was released into the wind, forming a deadly cloud that burned the lungs, blinded the eyes, and caused panic among soldiers. Soon, other gases, phosgene and mustard gas, joined the arsenal, creating an invisible horror that spread indiscriminately across the battlefield. Gas attacks forced armies to innovate quickly. Soldiers scrambled for early gas masks, often rudimentary cloths soaked in urine or chemicals, as protective gear struggled to keep pace with the lethal innovation. Even with protection, exposure could mean agonizing burns, permanent lung damage, or death. The gas didn't just kill, it terrorized. Entire units were paralyzed by fear, unsure if the next inhale would be their last. The psychological effects of chemical warfare were as brutal as the physical damage. Veterans recalled the panic of seeing fellow soldiers choke, cough, and collapse under a seemingly harmless green cloud. Commanders learned to coordinate attacks with wind direction, timing, and artillery, turning the weather itself into an instrument of death. Poison gas forever changed warfare. It blurred the line between front lines and rear positions, forcing civilians and medical personnel to confront the horrors of modern combat. While its use was later banned by international treaties, its debut in World War I demonstrated a grim truth. In industrialized warfare, death could come not only from bullets or shells, but from the very air soldiers breathed. Amid the mud, barbed wire, and chaos of the trenches, a new weapon rumbled onto the battlefield: the tank. These armoured behemoths were designed to break the deadlock of trench warfare, rolling over obstacles, crushing barbed wire, and providing mobile firepower that infantry alone could not. First deployed by the British at the Battle of the Somme in 1916, tanks were slow and mechanically unreliable, yet their psychological and tactical impact was immediate and profound. Tanks represented a radical shift in military strategy. They could withstand machine gun fire and artillery shrapnel, giving advancing troops a shield that had never existed before. For the first time, soldiers witnessed a machine that combined armour, firepower, and mobility, a terrifying symbol of industrialized war. Even when early models broke down or got stuck in the mud, their mere presence struck fear into the hearts of enemy soldiers who had never faced anything like it. The introduction of tanks forced armies to adapt quickly. New tactics emerged, combined arms attacks that coordinated infantry, artillery, and tanks. Engineers worked tirelessly to improve their speed, armour, and weaponry. Soldiers learned to respect these rolling monsters while also relying on them for protection, realizing that success now required not just courage, but the support of machines built for destruction. Tanks were more than just a technological marvel. They embodied the brutal ingenuity of World War I. They reshaped battlefields, challenged traditional warfare, and left an enduring legacy that would echo into every modern conflict that followed. Before World War I, airplanes were seen as fragile toys, novelties for stunts and exploration. By 1914, they became lethal tools of war. Aircraft transformed the battlefield, offering reconnaissance, bombing, and aerial combat that no army had ever experienced. Pilots became the new knights of the sky, facing enemy planes with machine guns mounted on fragile wings, where one mistake could mean a fiery death. Reconnaissance planes were the eyes of generals, revealing troop movements, enemy fortifications, and supply lines. Artillery officers relied on this aerial intelligence to direct devastating barrages with unprecedented accuracy. Soon, fighter planes equipped with synchronized machine guns turned the skies into battlefields themselves, with daring dogfights testing courage, skill, and nerves. Bombers added a terrifying dimension. Small tactical bombs could disrupt supply lines, while larger bombs threatened cities and infrastructure, bringing the war to civilians far from the front lines. Air raids introduced fear from above, forcing nations to rethink both defense and civilian preparedness. The pilots' stories were legendary, men facing impossible odds, engaging in deadly maneuvers hundreds of feet in the air, all while staring death in the face. Air combat demanded not just skill, but guts, as every sortie carried the risk of being shot down or crashing behind enemy lines. Aircraft in World War I marked the beginning of modern air warfare. They demonstrated that control of the skies could determine the outcome of battles, and they introduced a new type of soldier, one who fought with bravery and technology in a deadly dance above the chaos of trenches below. Trenches were the defining image of World War I. Long, narrow ditches carved into the earth, stretching for miles across the front lines. They were meant to protect soldiers from machine gun fire and artillery, yet life inside was a relentless battle against mud, rats, disease, and the constant threat of death. For millions of men, the trenches were both home and prison, a place where courage and survival were inseparable. Daily life was grueling. Soldiers faced waterlogged trenches that turned into quagmires after rain, bringing trench foot, infections, and unbearable misery. Vermin thrived among the filth, spreading disease and gnawing at the soldiers' rations. Sleep was scarce, food was often inedible, and fear was constant. Every day men risked their lives in going over the top, leaving the relative safety of their trenches to cross no man's land, facing machine gun fire, artillery and barbed wire. Despite the horrors, trenches fostered camaraderie and resilience. Soldiers relied on each other for protection, encouragement and survival, forming bonds that would last a lifetime. Commanders had to innovate constantly, devising new strategies to break enemy lines while minimizing casualties. Yet the reality was grim. Massive offensives often gained only yards of territory at enormous cost. Trench warfare illustrated the brutal stagnation of industrialized combat. It highlighted the limits of human endurance in the face of technological destruction and created a new kind of hero, one who could survive not through glory, but through grit, determination, and sheer willpower in the mud and blood of the front line. While bullets, bombs, and gas dominated headlines, the silent war of intelligence played a decisive role in World War I. Communication systems, ranging from telegraphs and field telephones to primitive radios, were lifelines that determined the speed and accuracy of strategy. Armies that could intercept enemy messages, crack codes, and transmit orders efficiently gained an undeniable advantage, often deciding battles before the first shot was fired. Espionage became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Spies, informants, and codebreakers risked their lives behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and sabotaging operations. Women, often overlooked by conventional military thinking, played pivotal roles as couriers, agents, and cryptographers. The secrets they carried could turn the tide of battles, providing the crucial insight that would save thousands of lives or seal the fate of entire units. Radio communication revolutionized coordination, allowing generals to direct artillery and troop movements in real time. Yet it also introduced vulnerability. Intercepted signals could reveal strategies to the enemy. The constant interplay between secrecy and revelation became an invisible battlefield where intellect, timing, and daring were as lethal as any weapon. World War I demonstrated that information could be just as powerful as guns. Armies learned that mastery over communication and intelligence could make the difference between victory and defeat, transforming war into a multidimensional contest where brains fought alongside brawn and subtle ingenuity often outweighed brute force. World War I was not only a battle of guns and machines, it was also a crucible of medical innovation. The unprecedented scale and brutality of the conflict forced doctors, nurses, and researchers to develop new ways to save lives and treat injuries that had once been almost certainly fatal. The war became a grim laboratory for modern medicine, where necessity drove remarkable advancements. Ambulance corps and battlefield triage systems were refined to move wounded soldiers quickly from the front lines to field hospitals. Surgeons pioneered new techniques in treating gunshot wounds, amputations, and shrapnel injuries, often working in unsanitary and overcrowded conditions. Plastic surgery emerged as a critical field, helping soldiers disfigured by explosions reclaim some semblance of normal life. Antiseptics and early antibiotics were introduced, drastically reducing the rate of fatal infections, yet the human cost remained staggering. Millions survived only to endure lifelong disabilities, chronic pain, and psychological trauma. Shell shock, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, left countless veterans struggling to reintegrate into society. Nurses and medics faced the emotional toll of endless suffering, witnessing the fragility of life on a scale previously unimaginable. World War I reshaped medical science, highlighting both the resilience and vulnerability of the human body. It proved that survival in modern warfare required not just courage and weaponry, but also the ingenuity of doctors and caregivers, whose tireless work saved lives and laid the foundation for the medical advances of the 20th century and beyond. In World War I, the battle wasn't only fought with guns and bombs, it was also waged on the mind. Psychological warfare became a critical, if terrifying, component of strategy, designed to break enemy morale, sow confusion, and instill fear on a massive scale. Soldiers faced constant stress from artillery barrages, gas attacks, and the ever-present threat of death, while propaganda sought to manipulate beliefs and emotions both on the front lines and at home. Shell shock, now understood as post-traumatic stress disorder, was widespread. The deafening roar of artillery, the sudden blasts of grenades, and the sight of fallen comrades created a mental strain that rivaled the physical dangers of combat. Troops often suffered from panic, disorientation, and paralysis, reducing their effectiveness and in many cases causing lasting psychological damage. Psychological warfare during World War I demonstrated that victory was not determined solely by bullets or bombs. The ability to manipulate fear, morale, and perception could tilt the balance of battles and even entire campaigns. The human mind became a weapon and a target, highlighting that in modern war survival depended as much on mental resilience as on physical courage. World War I forever changed warfare. Guns, gas, tanks, and aircraft revolutionized combat, while medical and psychological innovations saved lives and improved understanding of trauma. Civilians became participants and casualties in total war. The war demonstrated that human ingenuity could produce both extraordinary progress and devastating destruction. Its legacy reminds us that technology can be both a shield and a scourge. Understanding the gas, guns, and guts of World War I is essential to remembering the costs of conflict and the power of human innovation.